The clock on the wall showed 3:47 a.m. President Ibrahim Traoré hadn't slept in 31 hours. His eyes were bloodshot, his usually pristine military uniform was wrinkled, and his hands trembled slightly as he held the final report. In exactly 17 hours, the International Monetary Fund would arrive at his office, expecting an answer, accept their loan with its crushing conditions, or present them with $387 million that his country didn't have. The world was watching. The Western media had already written their headlines. Burkina Faso surrenders to economic reality. They were wrong. What happened in the next 17 hours would become the most audacious financial operation in African history. And it started with a single text message at 3:48 a.m. The message was from Colonel Marcus Senare, head of the newly formed Financial Intelligence Unit, a man whose name you won't find in any official records because officially he didn't exist. Sir, we found them. All of them. The ghosts are real? Traoré stood up so fast his chair fell backward. The ghosts. That's what they called the phantom accounts. The hidden fortunes, the stolen billions that everyone knew existed but no one could prove. For 3 months, Sangaré's team had been hunting, following digital breadcrumbs through 17 countries, 4 continents, and the darkest corners of the international banking system. And now, at the 11th hour, they had found them, but finding them and getting them were two different things. The money was hidden behind layers of shell companies, protected by international law, guarded by some of the most expensive lawyers in the world. Traoré had less than 17 hours to do what normally took years of legal battles. He picked up his secure phone and made 3 calls. The first was to the Attorney General. The second was to the head of the Anti-Corruption Bureau. The third was to someone whose identity remains classified to this day. Operation Clean Sweep is a go. He said, "We have 48 hours to find 387 million. Failure is not an option." The first target was Jean-Baptiste Compaoré, former Minister of Mining, who had fled to Dubai 7 months earlier. Intelligence suggested he had siphoned off over 100 million through fake equipment purchases and ghost companies. But Compaoré was smart. His money was scattered across 19 different banks in 7 countries, hidden behind a web of trusts and foundations that would take years to unravel unless you had what Sangaré had. Compaoré's personal laptop retrieved from his abandoned mansion with a password helpfully written on a sticky note attached to the screen. Amateur mistake for a professional thief. At 4:15 a.m., as Compaoré slept in his Dubai penthouse, his world began to collapse. Bank accounts in Switzerland received notices of immediate freeze orders. Properties in France were seized. A yacht moored in Monaco was impounded. But the real prize was in Singapore. $43 million sitting in an account that Compaoré thought was invisible. It wasn't. By 5 a.m., the money was frozen pending immediate repatriation to Burkina Faso. Compaoré woke up to 57 missed calls and a simple message from an unknown number. The ghosts have been found. The second phase began at sunrise. 3 private jets were scheduled to leave Ouagadougou Airport that morning. All filed standard flight plans to Paris, London, and Geneva. Nothing unusual except intelligence had been monitoring these flights for weeks. They belonged to gold smugglers who had been bleeding Burkina Faso dry, shipping out unprocessed gold worth millions while declaring costume jewelry worth thousands. Today their luck ran out. The first jet belonged to Alexander Dubois, a French Burkinabe businessman who claimed to export agricultural equipment. When security forces surrounded his plane at 6:30 a.m., they found something very different from farming tools. Hidden in false compartments were 7 tons of gold bars worth approximately 78 million at current prices. Dubis tried to claim diplomatic immunity. He didn't have it. He tried to bribe the officers. They recorded everything. Within an hour, he was in custody and the gold was in the central bank. The second jet told an even more interesting story. It belonged to a company called Sahel Logistics, officially owned by a woman named Marie Tazier, who investigation revealed had died 3 years ago. The real owners were a network of military officials who had been stealing gold from government mines for years. The plane contained not just gold, but documents, contracts, bank statements, WhatsApp messages, discussing shipments, even videos of the loading process. It was evidence worth more than gold. $42 million in precious metals were recovered. But more importantly, the evidence led to 17 immediate arrests and the freezing of another $30 million in associated accounts. The third jet never made it to the runway. Its pilot, seeing what happened to the first two, made a desperate attempt to escape by road. He made it 12 kilometers before being stopped at a checkpoint that had mysteriously appeared overnight. Inside his vehicle, 800 kilos of code and something even more valuable, a hard drive containing the entire customer database of the smuggling network. Every buyer, every seller, every corrupt official who had looked the other way. It was a treasure map to hundreds of millions in stolen wealth. By noon, Traoré had recovered $150 million, but he needed more, much more, and time was running out. That's when the second text arrived from Sanare. "Sir, you need to see this." Ministry of Finance, Basement Level 3, Vault 7. Nobody knew about Vault 7. It wasn't on any building plans. It didn't officially exist. But Sanare's team had noticed something odd in the building's power consumption. The basement was using 3 times more electricity than it should. Enough to power industrial-grade dehumidifiers and climate control systems. Why would a basement need that unless it was storing something that couldn't tolerate moisture? What they found in Vault 7 would later be described in court as the most brazen theft of public funds in West African history. Cash, mountains of it, euros, dollars, pounds, Swiss francs, even gold coins stacked from floor to ceiling in a room that had been sealed since the previous administration. The serial numbers on some of the bills trace back to aid payments from the European Union that was supposed to have been used for hospital construction. The hospitals were never built. The money had been waiting, presumably, for the former president to return and claim it. Total value, $93 million, but as the money was being counted, loaded, and secured, a crisis was developing. Someone had leaked information about Operation Clean Sweep to the international press. Within hours, Reuters, Bloomberg, and the Financial Times were running stories about Burkina Faso's desperate cash grab and assault on property rights. International lawyers were filing injunctions. The Swiss government expressed concern about the freezing of accounts. The French foreign minister called it economic banditry. The pressure was building for Traoré to stop, to negotiate, to compromise. He refused. At 2 p.m., with 34 hours left on the clock, Traoré held an emergency press conference. But instead of defending his actions, he did something unexpected. He started reading names. Michel Beaumont, former advisor to the president, transferred $7 million to a CryAid account on March 15th. Patricia Lawler, former head of the National Lottery, diverted $12 million through a casino in Macau. Robert Tombiano, former army chief, received $18 million in kickbacks from ammunition contracts where the ammunition was never delivered. He read for 23 minutes, 78 names, each with amounts, dates, and bank account numbers. The room was silent except for the sound of keyboards as journalists frantically typed. These people, Tro said, looking directly into the camera, stole from schools that were never built, hospitals that were never equipped, roads that were never paved. They stole from the mouths of hungry children and the hands of desperate farmers. Today, we are not stealing. We are returning what was stolen, and we have the receipts. He held up a flash drive. Every document, every transfer, every crime will be published online in 1 hour. Let the world judge who the real thieves are. The impact was immediate. The international criticism stopped. How could Western governments defend officials who had provably stolen aid money meant for development? How could they protect accounts filled with money meant for vaccines and school books? The narrative flipped. Burkina Faso wasn't seizing assets. It was recovering them. Traoré wasn't a dictator. He was a crime fighter. And the clock kept ticking. Hour 36 brought the biggest breakthrough. For months, intelligence services had been tracking a ghost ship, a cargo vessel that appeared on no registry, flew no flag, and officially didn't exist. It had been spotted off the coast of Togo, Ghana, and Ivory Coast, always at night, always in international waters. Satellite imagery showed it periodically approaching the Burkina Faso coast, staying just long enough for smaller boats to reach it, then disappearing again. The working theory was drugs or weapons. The reality was more valuable. The ship was a floating treasury, a mobile bank for the criminal elite. Gold, diamonds, cash, even artwork, all stored in temperature-controlled containers, protected by mercenaries, sailing in circles while its owners waited for the heat to die down. But someone had talked. A crew member, tired of being paid in promises, had reached out to Burkinabe intelligence for $20,000 and a new identity. He provided GPS coordinates, security details, and most importantly, the information that the ship would dock in Togo in 12 hours for resupply. Traoré made a call to the president of Togo, a difficult conversation that involved promises, threats, and eventually a deal.